Have you ever had a tap on your shoulder, yet no one was around? A chill down your spine so cold, feels like ice. How about reoccurring unpleasant thoughts that you know are not your own? How do you know there's not a shadow walking alongside in every moment? An influence unseen, undetectable, undefinable, but may have been with you for lifetimes? Often these karmic passengers can be with you for far longer than we realize. Is there a link between our shadow and another entity? All this and more on tonight's episode with your host, Trisha Margus, and special guest, Laura Van Tyke from the Karmic Path. Enjoy. When Laura's daughter began to see and hear spirits, Laura's life took a sudden turn into the world of the paranormal. It taught her that the spiritual world affects us all. Laura is far from the only one out there with these experiences. Not wanting karma to waste energy, she has made it her life mission to serve others who may find themselves in the deep end of the paranormal pool.
Degree turns, where we expand the minds, beliefs, and perspective of the collective while awakening the sleeping many. Today we have special guest Laura Van Tyne. She is a remote viewer, a speaker, and author. She specializes in crossing over parasitic implant removal, etheric medicine, quantum healing hypnosis, Milab recovery through regression therapy, and soul retrieval. This year, Laura's focus has been the spiritual war and barriers that limit someone from accessing their true potential and experience. She offers solutions for etheric protection, focusing on specific tools and modalities for spiritual protection and raising your frequency to optimize your spiritual health. Her new book, Soul Tribe, to be released July 1st, 2021, shares insight on transitioning through the spiritual awakening while expanding and growing your relationship with your higher self and building your spiritual team and soul tribe. Hello, Laura. How are you today?
Fine, thank you. Thanks for having me.
I'm so happy to have you on. How are you doing in this crazy time?
Every day is full of different craziness, isn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely. So I would love if we had a simple brief introduction here. I'd love to hear from your side. How did you get into the path that you're in right now? How did you create Karmic Path? What was the initial stepping stones for you?
Well, I used to be a Spanish and math teacher, and I taught in the public school system for years. And one day, one of our daughters woke up extremely psychic, and it was like, what do you do with this? She's seeing and hearing all kinds of beings and entities that at the time I couldn't see. Even though when I was a kid, I was psychic. My parents were like, don't be weird, and it kind of went away. And then my daughter sort of forced that back with me. And throughout the process, I learned that we're not the only ones out there with those issues. And it became the impetus for me to start to help other people understand how the fourth dimension impacts us every single day. So our physicality, what we see, touch, hear, smell, is the third dimension. These are our physical bodies, right? And these physical bodies they're really more like rental units, right? We don't keep them forever. But what we house within that is our soul. Mm-hmm. And that is the key element here. So when a person dies and they leave their physical body, what happens to the energy that animates that body? That's the soul energy. Where does it go? And in my trials and tribulations of trying to figure this out, I learned that a lot of souls get stuck between dimensions. They get stuck between heaven and earth, which is the fourth dimension. And this is critical because if a soul is stuck in the fourth dimension, Soul evolution, soul healing, soul health, soul restoration does not happen. And the fourth dimension impacts us every single day, whether we're conscious of it or not. Throughout the history of the world, throughout cultures, throughout languages, every place on this planet has words for ghosts, angels, and demons. If they didn't exist, why is that? Why is it that 500 BC India has those same concepts as 1600 Ireland or 1962 the United States? It's because they exist, and that dimension is always seems to be creating an overlay. What I've learned in the process is that every soul has to cross over, no matter how they lived or how they died. How many times have we heard, and I'm sure you've heard it too, I hope they rot in hell, right? I hope they burn in hell. If that's the case, they can impact us in the third dimension. That's a problem. And throughout my studies, throughout my education, and trying to figure this out, because at the same time, I'm literally fighting for my family soul. I have to figure this out because what is attacking me and my daughter, they're not unicorns and rainbows. There's a lot of darknesses there, and I had to figure out what to do with them and how to deal with them. And in the process, I learned that every soul has to cross over. So it stops the cycle, the karmic path. When a soul crosses over, we're stopping that karmic clock so they can go and move on. So that's kind of where that name, the karmic path, originated from, is we all have karma. We are all here incurring karma. And we can look at karma as a bank account too, right? Additions and debits and credits and stuff. So when we cross over, then that karmic clock stops ticking in the third dimension.
So thank you for that amazing introduction. So where can we, I feel there's many different avenues we can go down. So in your understanding, let's maybe start fundamentally from your understanding, what is karma? Is it a neutral place? Is it really positive, negative? Because a lot of people throw around that word, and I'd love to understand from your perspective what it is and what are its implications for us on this earth, the third dimension.
Karma is just balance. Karma seeks balance. Karma seeks justice. When we incarnate here, we come here for the lessons and experiences our soul needs on our karmic path. And in the process, every action has a reaction. And you can throw a pebble in the water, or you can throw a boulder in the water, right? The ripples and rings are different. What I have learned is that the karmic implications carry us throughout our soul's history. So karma, it is not necessarily linear, but it goes back in time and forward in time. A lot of times people say, well, I am out of the karmic wheel. Then why are you on the planet? We can't escape it. And it's not a negative. A lot of times we hear karma's a bitch, karma's this, da, da, da. I hope karma gets you. Karma can be exquisitely beautiful, right? It depends on how we choose to view it. And one of the concepts that I've learned throughout the years that creates a ghost or a soul stuck between dimensions is guilt or sin. So if we can remove our actions as being guilty or sinful and relabel them as experiences, now we get to learn a lesson from the experience if we choose to. If we don't, karma will try to offer us another lesson with a slight twist to it. How many times have people had the same boyfriend or had the same girlfriend, right? Or you feel like your boss is like your dad or your mom. Well, that's because karma wants to know if you've learned the lesson. And when we've learned the lesson, those experiences tend to cease and we get to move on.
I think it's a wonderful way to put it too, because if you look at all the programming just culturally from religion, they tend to really put to people that we're in sin, right? Or that we're already born with all this baggage, right? When really if we were to look at karma as experiences versus guilt and shame and all these really heavy emotions that are definitely on the lower end of the spectrum of consciousness, right? That's what keeps people then bogged down, like the third dimension versus going up to like the fifth, sixth. Is that correct? Would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to pick on one religion in particular, because when you walk through the front doors of this religion, you see the torture of an ascended master. You see the tortured Christ hanging on a cross with a crown of thorns, blood, tears. That perpetuates guilt. Here's another little interesting fact, that a lot of times in that Catholic Church, they will take dragon's blood in the thuribles to clear the church before the people get in. Why does the church need to be cleared?
It's supposed to be such a sacred, honorable place, right? What are they clearing?
The earlier, and I don't want to make this about religion necessarily, but the earlier depictions of Christ, he's standing there with his arms and palms open. And it's very different than when you see the tortured Christ, because to me, that is a very low frequency, almost blasphemous concept.
That it sticks with her on people and all the items that you see in people's homes and jewelry and all that. It definitely will. It's like a perpetual reminder.
Yes, it is. And I don't want to pick on them, because churches do have good points to them too. There's a good sense of community a lot of times. There's a lot of good points, but that invocation of guilt really is a low frequency emotion.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So then you said that guilt it keeps people in the third dimension. So then when someone, let's say, they pass in a very traumatic way, like they didn't expect, it wasn't something slow like cancer or something like that. It was just let's say a car hits them, right? What happens to their soul? Are they then suddenly stuck in the different layers of the fourth dimension? Do they find the light? What has been your experience?
That's a really good question. So a soul who has been suddenly ejected from their body, most of the time they do not know they're dead. And I see this along the roads and highways. So think about in your community where there's something called the dead man's curve, or there's an area where there's always car accidents, right? Mm-hmm. There's a pileup of predecessor energy there, because when somebody is killed in a car accident, their soul is still there. They're looking for help. And so for the living people, you don't consciously see the person's, that soul standing there, but your subconscious can see it and divert your attention for a minute, right? And then you have a car accident. So when a soul is suddenly ejected out of their body, they tend not to cross over, and they need help. They really need help. And one of the things that I'm really hoping that people understand is that do not ever assume your loved one has crossed over. Don't assume that. If you have a loved one that's crossed over, you can actually go to my website, thekarmicpath.com. On the services page, there's a free download of a crossing over prayer that you can use to cross over your loved one. I have had testimonials all over the world of the effectiveness of this crossing over prayer. Use it, it's free. The only thing you have to lose is a little bit of time, but it can save a soul's literally path.
So I guess then I've got a different question in regards to when someone thinks that they're contacting a loved one. How can they distinguish between it being a true, like let's say their uncle that passed or something, versus a being that's veiled as or has a guise as an uncle that they know, but it's not truly them? How do you know? Is there an easy earth way to distinguish it?
Really good question. So first of all, when a soul dies, when a person dies and their soul is there, they need to cross over. Once a soul has crossed over and gone home into the heavens, heaven world, higher dimensions, they can't sit down with us and have dinner, because that is a ghost energy. All right, so if we are contacted with or talking with our loved one and they're there, we need to cross them over. But you bring up a really good point. And that is, how do I know that that soul is my grandma, is my uncle? One of the best ways, everybody's psychic. Everybody has psychic ability. Intuition is our most profound psychic ability. Trust your gut. And what you can do is simply, if you have that loved one that's nearby you, you feel it or you sense it, visualize yourself pouring down a rain of salt over that individual. If it is your loved one, they will stay in that form. If it is a shapeshifter from the fourth dimension, they can't hold it because that salt frequency cleanses them and they have to go back to their original shape, their original being. Usually it's a dark entity of some sort. So when that happens, you know that that's not your loved one. And call on your guides or angels to remove that being or entity from the fourth dimension and take it back to the heaven world, because they are impacting us on a negative manner and we need to clean up the fourth dimension.
So does that mean then when someone is, let's say, calling in their deceased uncle and it ends up being, let's say, a darker entity, does that mean that there's already like an energetic match between that person trying to connect to their uncle, but really they connect to a darker energy? Like there's already a cord there, or is it just by intention? Like how does that happen?
So the fourth dimension has all kinds of beings and creatures, not unlike our third dimension. I use a zoo analogy a lot, right? We've got lions and cats and meerkats and reptiles and there's so many different entities in that fourth dimension that wreak havoc on us. And so, for example, I had a client whose mother died, and I helped her cross her mom over. And there was a mom, daughter, and grandma. Grandma died. Mom and I crossed grandma over, and the daughter is playing with the Ouija board with her friend, and they didn't have a Ouija board, but they thought they could make one. So they made their own Ouija board. And the daughter is telling the mom, guess what? I can talk to grandma all the time now. And so she calls in grandma, and the client is like, Laura, what's up with that? I thought we crossed my mom over. And I said, well, and this client actually lives close to me, and most of my clients, I work remotely. I said, well, do you mind if I come over and talk to your daughter? And I get over to the house, I talk to the daughter, and when I work in the fourth dimension, I do a lot of safety protocols. And I basically created this ring in the center of their living room. And I asked the daughter, I said, I would love to talk to your grandma. Could you have your grandma step into the living room right here? And I have this ring that I have created. So grandma shows up, and they could read the daughter's mind. These dark entities can read our thoughts and wants and desires. So when they were playing with the Ouija board, they were able to read their minds and what they wanted, and they got to create that. And when they created it, they created a strong connection with the daughter. She's a teenager. Teenage girls seem to love this stuff. And now it became part of her spiritual team in a way. It's very dangerous. So this creature is in the circle disguised as grandma, and the mom and daughter are rather psychic. So I poured salt on it, and it turned into literally a reptilian in front of their eyes.
Wow.
That was not grandma.
No.
So now the next part of the equation is how do we get the reptilian out of their life, right?
And back to source, right? Or where would you
I send it back to source.
Yeah.
Okay. I feel like I'm doing a lot of segues here, but if you ever have a psychic who buries, banishes, casts away any soul, any entity, run. Because when we cast away a ghost, it becomes someone else's problem. When we bury entities or bind or bury entities into the ground, what does that do to the frequency of the earth? They all need to go to source. Call in your angels. Request angelic help to remove these beings and entities from your space. It works, and it's so simple. We think that these entities have more power over us than they really do, but they don't, because we have the tools to remove them, and it's time we start doing this as a huge collective.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I think you mentioning how putting them back to source compared to binding and casting them away is huge. It's very, very important because we all originate from source. The dark and the light all comes from the same place, right? So
Bring
by
'em up.
casting those beings back to where they came from the original point of creation, that's when it could go back to like a neutral energy space. You know, it's everything is here for like you said, for us to learn and to experience and to understand more in depth from.
And when we return them to source, in my house there are many mansions, there's many dimensions, it's all the same concept, just a different terminology. It's above my pay grade to figure out who goes where, okay? Let the higher level beings decide who goes where. Jeffrey Epstein is not going to go to the same location as your grandma, right? So let them decide. It's not for us to decide. I never reserve judgment on any soul that I come across that I cross over, no matter how they lived or died. They go to source. This cleans up the fourth dimension. This is critical to the evolution of the humans and the planet. When we clean up the fourth dimension, we're robbing those dark entities, the reptilians, etc., of a food source. They were using my client's daughter as an energetic source. And it got a stop put to it, and it was a great lesson for her. And this is a great example. Her story is an example of karma never wasting energy. Because I had that experience with my client and her daughter and the grandma and the kid using the Ouija board, I can share that story so people can have another level of understanding about how that works. Karma never wastes energy. We just have to learn how to utilize it for the optimal good.
Absolutely. And I really do love that phrase. When I was looking over your website when we first started talking, I was like, this is a great line, and it's so wonderfully true that everything circles back around regardless of whatever energetic imprint one thinks it has.
It absolutely does.
Hmm.
And when we can learn how to understand that on a different level, we gain some wisdom and knowledge so we can make wiser choices, and it enhances our spiritual path when we do that.
So I guess I'd like to dive into then, when it comes to these dark entities, how can one be aware of them being around one? Like, let's say you're not passed over, you're on Earth, you're living here, your everyday life. How can you tell that you have maybe a darker entity? Is it like a personality change, or there's different cravings for things that aren't maybe as normal? Like, what have you seen in your work that could distinguish? I mean, because I know you're very psychic, and I'm sure many of our audience, the people are very psychic as well. But for those who maybe haven't opened their third eye in that way, how can you tell if there is an entity attachment within one's field, or like a hole in the aura, or things of that nature? Like, these are big issues, you know?
It is, and this is the crux of the problem, because we don't know what we don't know. One of the spiritual practices I recommend everybody do is to use the salt technique. And at night, when you wake up or you go to bed, visualize yourself pouring down a rain of salt over your home, over yourself. It helps to clean and clear, and that energy keeps perpetuating. But back to your question of how do you know? Have you ever walked into a business meeting and you could feel the tension? It was, so thick you could cut it with a knife, right? That's energy. What is feeding off of that? What is making that happen? Is there an energetic attachment to someone in the room? Is there something going on? Did you see something out of the corner of your eye? Do you feel repulsed by something? Do you feel depressed for no reason? Do you feel anxiety for no reason? When I say no reason, it's just like, why am I feeling this way? I woke up, everything's great. Why am I feeling this way? And I think we all have had those experiences. Chances are there's some dark entities or energies that are somewhere near or around you, and it's your spidey senses kicking in. And we all have the power to remove that and clear that ourselves. And when I work with a client, we work together. My clients will never say, oh, I had a psychic who told me that, blah, blah, blah. No, because when I work with a client, we work together and they can see what I'm seeing, and we clear and remove those entities. Clearing and removing the dark entities or energies around us is step one. Step two, how do you keep them away, right? I can put my finger in a hole in a dike, but yet another one's going to pop open if I don't shore up the structure. So I do a lot of work with psychic self-defense, spiritual self-defense, because we have to close up those holes and those portals that let them have access to us.
So what do you think would be one of the, I guess, main reasons that there's so many holes in like the Earth's aura, and everyone just is kind of unfortunately in the mess of it all? Like, do you feel like there's certain programs or agendas that have really catapulted the fourth dimension to be able to come down to the third in such a way?
Oh yeah, we have been in a spiritual war for millennia. It's time we wake up, smell the coffee, realize what's happening. When the Luciferic forces fell from the higher dimensions, from the light of God, they had to go somewhere. Where did they go? They had to leave. You can call it whatever name you want, heaven, source, creator. It's all the same concept, right? And I know there's so many different terminologies out there. So when the Luciferic forces left the light of God, they had to go somewhere. So they went from the fifth and above dimensions, they had to leave that. So they went down to the fourth dimension. Now they're in that fourth dimension, and now they need food. They need an energy supply to sustain themselves, right? Well, when the humans are here on the earth and we die, we are supposed to go from the third dimension, use the fourth dimension as a step-up transformer to raise our frequency, to cross over, to go to heaven, to go to home, to go to the heaven world, to source. But these entities set up shop in the fourth dimension, and they're using the fourth dimension as a step-down transformer. And they've basically created a net so they can capture these souls. And here's a really big news flash. Not all souls are reincarnated from the higher dimensions. Think about that. Not all souls have come from the higher dimensions. A lot of times, these entities will reincarnate these human souls from the fourth dimension. When that happens, they come back broken, with pieces of their souls missing. They're needing soul healing and restoration. They were never afforded that because they were never sent back to source. These entities will send them back over and over, more and more broken. And they also recruit. And recently I had a mom who called me. Her 17-year-old daughter is in college, and she comes home for spring break, and her daughter doesn't feel like herself. And her daughter says, Mom, I want to hurt my sister, and I don't know why I want to do this. Thank goodness this kid had enough wherewithal within her to report that to her mom. And so I guess the family had talked about having her see a therapist, this and that, and nothing worked. The mom sees me on some social media, something or other, and reaches out, emails me, and I work with her. And here's what happened to the daughter. She's in college. There's a lot of drinking, a lot of partying, and that's normal. But when that happens, these entities have access to us because our frequency is shot. When we are completely inebriated, we have no auric field for that moment, and they can come in. So this college student came home and with friends, but you can't see the friends or baggage. I'm going to call them baggage. Okay, they're not friends. There were three ghosts with her and a dark entity, a black magician. I call them black magicians. It was actually an alien race. This dark entity was teaching the ghosts how to torture the humans. How do we stand a chance if we don't get this knowledge out there? So these three ghosts are in charge of puppeting and parroting the living girl to cause harm to her sister. I removed the ghosts, I removed the entities. She's fine. She has no harmful thoughts anymore. And this is about 2 months ago. Nothing.
Wow. That's incredible. I mean, to not even just have attachments, but then the attachments are teaching one another how to utilize their own skill set. I mean, I guess, yeah, everything is a lesson in a school, but that I've never heard of that kind of experience
It's
before.
politics. Every dimension has politics. We have it in our third dimension. We have a hierarchy, a political structure. The higher realms have a political structure. So do the lower realms, the fourth dimension. They need to keep recruiting. Any good organization needs to keep recruiting, right?
Yeah. It's a strong business model that they've got going. So you do have a really unique skill set, Laura, with your experience. I know with like Satanic ritual abuse and MK Ultra victims and also Milab survivors. So I would love it if we could kind of segue and kind of go into soul fragmentation and how to get those pieces back, because I know that all of those I guess you call them programs, they severely fracture the soul, and in such ways that I don't even know if you could piece it together in one lifetime. What has, from your understanding, let's kind of, for our audience, give a brief overview of Milab and what that is compared to MK Ultra and SRA, if you could.
So, satanic ritual abuse happens in many dimensions. And that's how I got my start down that rabbit hole. My family, my husband and daughters and I went to the Getty Museum in 2013. And we're there, and I didn't know anything. All I knew was, I was helping dead people. I crossed dead people over, that was it. We're at the Getty Museum, and I get there and I get really, really sick. And I have to go sit down, and I literally lay down on the little grassy knoll between the two buildings at the Getty Museum, this grown woman laying on the grass. And all of a sudden, my wrists and arms get locked down to the ground. I am pinned to the ground in public, in daylight. I can't get up. I can't move. I'm like, what the heck? And all of a sudden, I see all of these souls just like funneling out, funneling out. I can still work with my mind, and I'm crossing them over as fast as I can. I couldn't understand it because they were from different eras and different cultures, and usually that doesn't happen, and that's not normal. And I was there for about 2 hours. I couldn't move. Fast forward a few years, and throughout the time, I find myself working in these tunnels. I am at the movie theater with my daughters, and we're watching, something benign like Cinderella or whatever. And I leave my body, and I'm in these tunnels, and I'm removing these children in tunnels over and over and over. This went on for 7 years before I figured out that it was a real thing. Am I making this up? Am I crazy? What's going on? And what I learned was these children are victims of satanic ritual abuse. It's what fuels their fire. And when you can remove those child souls, and they get reincarnated over and over and over. Sometimes they see daylight, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're bred and sold, sometimes they're stolen, sometimes they are bred in captivity. Crossing them over was my first understanding of satanic ritual abuse. And I also work with clients who are victims, living victims of satanic ritual abuse. That's a tough one. It takes a lot of strength and courage to break free. And even if you can just do only so much, it's still that 1 degree echoing out moves more and more and more, right? And so the satanic ritual abuse is one aspect. We've got the super soldiers, we've got MK Ultra. There's all of these different programs that have been created by different dark beings and entities. It's all related at the same time, but yet it's slightly different. The end result is the same. It doesn't matter if I'm working with an MK Ultra victim, a satanic ritual abuse victim, or an SSP. My methods and procedures are the same to help them. And the first part is we need to remove the torturers. Then we have to give that person enough strength, the living person enough strength and fortitude so they're not constantly harassed. And this is the heartbreaking part, is it didn't take them a day to get that way. It's not going to take a day to remove that torture and that abuse. And then you're dealing with what happened, mentally. I mean, I have heard things that would make the angels weep on a good day. So helping them to restore their soul and soul pieces is a big deal. And it may not happen in this lifetime. I wish I could say it would, but I would be lying. It takes a long time sometimes, but sometimes it doesn't. I was working with another client who felt like she had a soul piece missing and she didn't understand, and we did some work. I'll do hypnotherapy too, because that can provide a lot of answers. And she had been the victim of alien abductions many, many times, and we learned through that these alien abductions take pieces of our soul. Some of the soul pieces that are the most valuable to them are the high frequency emotions. When they can remove high frequency emotions from us, love, hope, compassion, that soul is now operating in the third dimension without those, I'm calling them operative emotions. They become violent and volatile. They create divisions within family units. And they have what I call mitigated free will. They don't know what they don't know, but yet we're still responsible karmically for our actions. So sometimes the free will is mitigated. This is why I never judge a person's path. I don't know their soul's history. So when we can start to understand that these things are real, we start to clean up the fourth dimension, we take our power back. I'm all about empowering people to do it themselves. I don't want to have a client that has to rely on me for 10 years. I want them to be able to help themselves. And if I can help them do that, get there, that makes the world a much better place.
Well, that is very wonderfully put. I think ultimately empowerment is what we all seek as humans, and beyond. We want to feel that we know who we are, where we come from, and where we're going, right? On a level that energetically it feels sound to every one of us. And I can only barely fathom what different MK Ultra and SRA victims have gone through. I mean, that's just, I can only imagine how devastating, how devastating it is. But I guess my question to you then would be, do you feel that people who are abducted, right, do you feel that they have had made contracts in a different soul, maybe under a different level of consciousness, that they didn't understand what they're getting into, and that's how they got intertwined? Or was it a very conscious, like, this is my soul family, my star family? You see how it can get really convoluted.
So the short answer is, every contract that I have come across where I'm working with people in this manner, every single contract has been a false contract based on misinformation or false information. We are not held liable for that. We have to understand that, and we do not consent to those types of things. And when we understand that, we can take our power back. And a lot of times, this group of people, let's say Joe, is a victim of abduction. Well, chances are his family lineage may also be victims of that also. And so when they understand that they no longer have the power, those aliens, entities, beings aren't powerful. But we didn't know they were there because we missed the memo. The light side, and this kind of annoys me quite a bit, the light side never gave us the memo that these things are going on in the unseen world. So when we can understand that, we take our power back. If I'm working with somebody through hypnosis and we find out they've been abducted and it comes through the client, I'm never going to say that, oh, you were this or you were that in a past life. When they find out through themselves that they were abducted, I go in and I remove those entities that are doing the abductions. Then they get sent back to source. This stops that karmic clock from ticking. This gives them their soul sovereignty back. The only thing we ever own is our soul. Our souls must be sovereign. Our souls must be free. And I have a book coming out July 1st, Soul Tribe, Navigating the Spiritual War. And I talk about how you can build your spiritual team with intention and discernment. It's not all unicorns and rainbows out there. We have to be smart about this. We have to be pragmatic. And I don't want to be fear-based, but let's get real. What we're doing is not working.
Yeah, and especially when you look at just the general New Age movement, right? People are all about love and light, and yeah, that serves its purpose. But we have to see the darkness and understand, like, it has its importance to it, but we have to understand how to interact with it, how to really not just, I guess, be a puppet for it, you know? It's so there's so much depth inside of that. Not really.
Yeah, love and light's great, but it only gets you so far. Yeah. So there's a lot of things that the dark side has fed us throughout the history of our human existence. One is surround yourself in a bubble of white light. How many times have we heard that? Yeah. Okay, a bubble has no structure. Wind can pop a bubble, right? And now you're not protected. So what if you put yourself inside of a tetrahedron, a four-sided pyramid, and fill that with love and light and golden energy light or violet flame or whatever? Those dark beings and entities cannot penetrate a tetrahedron. It's a different way to execute the same concept.
Definitely. Well, I guess I would like to, is there anything you really want to talk about that you haven't had a chance to speak on other shows, or like new insights that you'd like to share or just speak on?
Trust yourself. Trust your gut. A lot of times we are programmed as children to not trust our intuition. It's time we take that power back. And you can start to learn how to trust your intuition little by little. If this is not your strong suit, take a deep breath, take a step back, and say, okay, A or B. You may be right, you may be wrong. Either way, you're going to learn from it. Mm-hmm. Trust your intuition. It is our most profound psychic ability. It's not as sexy as seeing dead people, right? But it is our most profound psychic ability because our intuition keeps us safe. Our intuition connects us to our higher self. It connects us to the God source.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. And it's funny because every time, I know I'm sure everyone in the audience, as well as you and I both, we've had experiences where you hear your intuition saying something, right? And you decide, oh no, I'm going to do this other thing instead. And it's always right. Going back to where your intuition originally pointed out, right? It's just about
we're all guilty.
Tapping
I'm not
into
going to use
it.
the word guilty,
Yeah.
but we all have had that experience, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And chalk it up as a lesson. It's no big deal. It's just a lesson.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. So with your psychic abilities, was it a gradual process that it came about, or did you because you said you had a very just normal life and this kind of stumbled upon you? Did your psychic abilities, did they grow as you became more in depth into this work that you're doing now, or how did your abilities come about?
Psychic abilities change all the time. So when I was a child, I would know where things were. Okay. And then when I was 12 years old, my best friend was killed in a freak horsing accident. And I didn't know she had died. My family and I were camping, and that morning I wake up and I tell my mom, Mom, Kelly died, and, I don't know what to do. And my mom's like, oh, that was just a dream, right? Just a dream. We get back from camping that weekend with friends and family, and we get this phone call that my friend Kelly was killed by a horse in a horsing accident. And Kelly stayed with me for a while, and that's kind of where my psychic abilities started developing. But at the time, my parents were like, oh, no, 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 you need to be normal. Don't talk about this, And so they went dormant. And this, I think, is common for so many people. Our parents are trying to protect us, or they're trying to, against the things they can't see or can't understand. So my abilities went dormant, and it wasn't until when my then 6-year-old daughter woke up and she could literally see through walls and doors. I didn't even know what to call it, remote viewing at the time. I had no idea. Um, she could see all of these beings and entities that I couldn't see. Our house was like a ghost super highway. I would joke around. It's like, yeah, it's like if Dr. Seuss were to write a book about dead people, it'd be there's fat ones and tall ones and hairy ones and scary ones. They're all over the place. And they all wanted my daughter's attention, but so did the dark entities. And I had to figure out what to do. And in my quest to figure out what to do, my abilities came back full force and then some. So I'm grateful for it. I think that dormant period I had enabled me to live a more of a normal life of a school teacher, and I had have a family. They're still here. Um, and those types of things. It gave me training for what I'm doing now. And I had to do a lot of soul searching and research. I don't prescribe to one methodology. I think all methodologies have their pluses and minuses, and we have to look to see what works, what fits. Mm. And I have been able to do all kinds of things I didn't even know existed based on this. And that's how I started down this. And I always knew, starting at the age of 12, that I was going to be doing something very unusual. And I didn't know what it was. I figured it was being a blonde Spanish teacher. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I knew I would be doing something unusual. And yes, that is true. And so now I work with my guides. I work with my team every day. They help me. I don't do this alone. Because of my spiritual team, my soul tribe, that's how and why I do what I do. And I owe them the credit. I'm just a vehicle here. I'm just on the ground floor. I'm their boots on the ground to help cleaning this up.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious then, with your spiritual team, can it be just a whole range of different like angelic beings or other like alien beings? Is there really like a right type of spiritual team from what you've seen, or can it be anything and anyone that resonates at your frequency or at your soul contracts or your soul? Well, how does one even begin to?
Really good question. Our soul team, our soul tribe is karmically earned based on our frequency, based on our experiences. But that doesn't mean your soul tribe stays the same all the time, because we don't stay the same. We change all the time. So the more spiritual service we do, the more wisdom we utilize, the more it enhances our spiritual team. When we do prayer and meditation, prayer is talking to the God source. Meditation is listening to the God source. That connects us to the divine. That connects us to source more than any building of wood and stone ever will. We have it within ourselves. And when we can start to do these things, we grow our spiritual team with intention and discernment. So when I'm working with somebody and I bring on angels, I call them angels of transition. These are the angelic teams that come in and cross over this ghostly souls that are stuck between dimensions. I never ever assume that those angels that arrive on that scene are the good guys. I always test them. I use discernment because they could be shapeshifters. If I were to assume that every time I called on these angels of transition for their assistance, that they would be it, that's my ego interfering, and that's dangerous. So there's some things you can do. So if you feel like you have dark entities or energies with you, call in your angels. Angels earn karma too. The more we utilize our angels, the more karma they earn. But we have to ask them. And this is in my book that's coming out in July. We need to ask them for their help. So I'm asking them to remove these souls and take them to the appropriate realm. Before I do that, I will pour salt all over them. I will pour frankincense on them. I will do a myriad of different tactics. I never do the same thing twice in a row because they expect a certain frequency, these dark entities. So if I can trick them, that gives me the upper hand. So they never know what trick I'm going to pull out. And my team is always giving me new tools along that same way.
Awesome. Well, this has just been such a really enlightening conversation. I really appreciate the time that you've had to spend here with us, Laura. And I would love for you to share with our audience, where can we find you next? I know you have a website, The Karmic Path. But are you doing any speaking engagements coming up? What are your next steps here? Because summer's coming right around.
It is. We're finally open and things are happening. I will be speaking at ESETI. I will be talking a lot about these topics at ESETI, which is up in Washington State, Trout Lake, James Gilliland. I'll be there, and I've got some things in Oregon. I'll be spending a lot of time, actually the whole summer, in the Pacific Northwest this year. So I'll be around doing a lot of different things, and looks like I'll be headed towards Colorado at some point, and on the East Coast for a little bit too, perhaps in Florida. So things are moving, we're opening up, and as they open up, there's more opportunities for travel and these types of activities. So I'm very excited.
Awesome. And then what about social media handles? Where can we find you there?
You can find me on Instagram, The Karmic Path, on Facebook, on Twitter. Those are the main ones. Telegram, and I'm on some other ones, but it's wherever your social media is. If you look up The Karmic Path, chances are you'll find me there. Okay. If you go to the website, thekarmicpath.com, there's a pop-up for a newsletter. And I don't send out newsletters often because I find them, more noise. But when I send them out, they're few and far between, but I'll be sending one out about the book release, Soul Tribe, and navigating the spiritual war, because I think that's information that everybody can use no matter where you're at on your spiritual path.
Absolutely. And it's imperative to understand that we are in a spiritual warfare. I mean, people say, when World War III is going to start, like it's already... and it's already here. It's just on a different level that most people are used to seeing. It's not Absolutely. Always bombs.
World War I and World War II were spiritual wars. And if we look at the history of the planet, we need to do something different because what we keep doing is not working. We need to understand and regain our soul sovereignty. Period. That is what's going to save us and this planet.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again, Laura, for coming on. And I will be seeing you at ESETI. I'll also be speaking there, so it'll be exciting to see you there. I saw your presentation last year for a bit, and I definitely enjoyed meeting you and understanding where you're coming from. So it's going to be wonderful to be up, I think, in Washington in the summertime in July. So if anyone is interested in checking out ESETI for the first time, or you're a returning guest, just check out their website, and definitely check out Laura's work. She does some awesome stuff. And thank you again for having this awesome conversation this evening. And we'll definitely stay in touch.
And thank you for the opportunity to help get this word out to help other people. So thank you so much for your spiritual service in all of this.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Laura. All right, everyone. Well, have a great evening, and we will catch you on the next episode. Bye.